Hello everyone, welcome to my patch 8.4 rundown. 8.4 is a huge patch. It's going to be a lot of fun to talk about. My name is Phreak. I'm a diamond level bot lane main caster for the North American pro scene and math aficionado. If you are afraid of charts, turn away now because there's lots of them. Alright, so 8.4 is really big. Oh my gosh, there's some notes from the designers. If you want to read that later on, you'll feel free to do that. The first major update is an overhaul to most AP items in the game. The basic thing was to add decisions. In my mind, there were three major bullet points. One is a decision in your first major item. Basically, there only ever was really a choice between Rod of Ages and Morellonomicon, and then occasionally Tear of the Goddess, but only for specific champions. In this case, they've broadened the Morellonomicon would-be options, or I should say the Lost Chapter options, into three specific items, and then still keeping Rod of Ages the item it is before as a different starting item. They also made major changes to what I call multiplier items. These are basically magic pen or ways to just ambiently sort of multiply your overall magic damage. So there's multiple paths now for that build because everyone went Haunting guys into Liambres every single game, and so they've diversified that a little bit. And then also they had some miscellaneous item updates that some good, some bad. Some can fall into the multiplier conversation. And also a couple of new items got added to the game. I think that's interesting as well. A lot of these would help non-mana using mages. Okay, so first up, Lost Chapter is 200 gold more expensive, but gains 10% cooldown reduction. This is generally considered a stat buff. Here's the numbers right here, right in the middle of your screen. As you can see, technically the item is slightly more efficient because 10 CDR typically doesn't cost that much gold. Will cost more than 200 gold, I should say. However, the item was already ridiculously efficient in and of itself because of the mana restore passive and everything else, so you could argue this item is a nerf in overall efficiency. Also, one of the major gains was to allow for there to be bad recalls. Lost Chapter was so cheap at 900 gold, it was almost impossible to prevent a mage from getting this item. Now, there's a lot longer to go until you can afford the combined cost, so there should be a slight laning phase nerf to some mages, but that's not a guarantee. Again, the item is still quite good. And it builds into three different items. Forget what the old items were, you've got new ones. The old Morellonomicon is gone. It's basically a different item. So in its place, you can start with Luden's Echo, Hextech GLP, or Archangel's Staff. These items all have very similar stat profiles to the old Morellonomicon. Let's bring that up. Up first is the Luden's Echo remake. So we can compare 8.3 to 8.4. That doesn't matter to me all that much. What I'd rather compare is Luden's Echo 8.4 to Morellonomicon. This item has a little bit less AP, a little bit more mana, the same CDR, and instead of the Grievous Wounds and Mana Restore, the item has the old Luden's Echo damage trigger. Now, I'm pretty certain the movement speed portion is gone entirely, and basically you're getting what you pay for. If you want the magic damage proc, the extra little bit of wave clear. If you're a poke mage like Xerath or Ziggs who lands abilities once in a while, but with relative frequency, this is pretty good for you. It's probably a straight buff to the item, depending on how much you really want to move speed, but trust me, both mana and CDR are very good stats and things you should totally care about, as the Echo passive is the same. Next up, the updated Hextech GLP. I think as far as a straight item, this is probably a nerf. I think the old Hextech GLP was probably underrated and more champions should have bought it. Because you really weren't paying that much for the active, all things considered, but whatever, that's too late now, we're in the past. But again, we compare new Hextech GLP to Morellonomicon, again, a little bit less AP, a little bit more mana, and the active is quite good. To look at the specific changes to Hextech GLP, here's the changes to the actual active. Frostbolt no longer pierces through units anymore. The slow is reduced, the missile speed is reduced. However, I think this is a buff, the cone has been narrowed and the range increased, so you're much more likely to tag people you care about, and the slow duration was doubled. So it definitely does get blocked by minions now, especially with the cone being somewhat, especially with the cone being somewhat narrowed. It's also a much worse wave clear tool. You no longer can one-shot minion waves with that plus pretty much any basic spell. But this is definitely still a reasonably efficient item. Again, you compare Hextech GLP, 80 AP, 3,000 gold. Here's old new Luden's Echo, 90 AP, 3,300 gold. So, comparable items in and of themselves. And again, compared to Morello's, you're paying a little bit more money, but for what I would argue is a much more sexy and interesting active with a similar stat profile. Otherwise, the goal with this item seems to be if you're going to roam and set up ganks. I also think champions like Swain, and you could argue Lux, who want a way to set up their other crowd control, this feels good for Swain because GLP will combo into your E push pull, and that's quite nice. So that's pretty cool. Next up, I think the biggest buff of all these items is Archangel's Staff. This one I actually will compare one to the other. So the goal as well, by the way, with Archangel Staff is, again, you can choose after your last chapter. You go Ludens, you go GLP, you go Archangels, and that should still be an option if you kind of compare this item. It's worth a lot of ability power. It's got a lot of stats on it. It's worth more AP over the course of the game as well. But if you just straight compare Archangel's old to new, for 100 more gold, you're getting a ton more stats. You're getting 20 CDR. You're getting only a very little bit less mana, or sorry, only a little bit less ability power. The extra mana, by the way, being already rolled into the AP. If you are already an Archangel's user, what I mean to say is this item is stupidly good now. If you're already playing Karthus or Ryze or Cassiopeia and you built tier, you are so freaking happy. I mean, seriously, this is nuts how much better the item is. 18 AP for 20 CDR is a choice you will, or a trade you will take, I think, incredibly frequently. This is super, 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 super good. Truly it is. To talk about the math on the item, by the way, because Archangels technically only has 50 AP on the item. What I did for the math here is I pretended the item was fully stacked with mana charge, meaning that this item was giving a 1400 total mana, and then plugged that into the AP. I did not count the base stats of any champion in the game, and most mages tend to reach about 1000 max mana, so another 30 AP on this item. Obviously, the old Archangels will have it too, no duh, we all know that, but as far as the pure value of Archangels as it now stands, compared to the other potential starting items, much more mana, more ability power, but even more ability power because of the conversion passive for your base stats and other mana items you might buy. But instead of the Ludens trigger or the GLP active, you get the Seraph's Embrace shield, which of course could be quite nice as well. So this item also becomes a pseudo HP item because the Seraph's Embrace shield is dealing with an extra 1400 max mana, which is quite a lot. One other thing I want to point out is unique passive haste, the way this works. Basically, these items all have 20 CDR on them. 10 CDR base, 10 CDR from haste. So they're worth 20 CDR, Archangel's worth 20 CDR, GLP's 20 CDR, this item's 20 CDR. The difference, though, is that if you stack another one of these items, like if you go GLP into Archangels, they all have haste. What that means is the second item in this sort of set is only worth 10 CDR. So GLP plus Archangels is 30% CDR. One other thing I want to talk about with these items, by the way, that I'm very excited about is there's more reasons to get one of the runes that I like a lot, which is Ingenious Hunter, which is active item CDR. You're going to buy a Hextech GLP as your first major item, or a Seraph's Embrace as your first major item, and you get to use the active much more frequently. That seems quite nice. One other small thing I want to point out is Seraph's Embrace plays really positively with Presence of Mind or Mana Flow Ban. I don't know if Mana Flow Ban actually works because it's not necessarily a spell, but with Presence of Mind, it refunds your mana costs, which means as soon as you get a kill or assist, you just pop Seraph's Embrace, your shield costs you 0 mana, all things considered, and you get the Seraph's shield. That is awesome. And I know I'm sure some mages are already doing this on purpose, but if you're a Seraph's user, even though you're probably going to have infinite mana in the general sense, getting to pop a full mana bar Seraph's shield at the very start seems really good, and I recommend it. And with the cooldown going down by about 40% due to Ingenious Hunter, you can get it up every single fight. That sounds powerful. All right, that's the starting AP items. Next up, the multiplier items. In the old version of the game, you bought Haunting Guys, you bought a Landry's Torment, you got a bunch of flat Magic Pen, you got some percent health burn, and you did everything. It was generically incredibly powerful, and that was boring. So they switched up the multiplier items. There's a lot of different options now. So first up, they remade Haunting Guys. They give it a bit more AP, but instead of flat pen, you get a unique passive called Madness, which is every second, while you're damaging champions, your magic damage sort of, I guess it doesn't say magic damage, it says the damage you deal, but whatever. This is a mage item, it has AP on it, it's going to essentially be magic damage in all cases, but increase the damage you deal by 2% per second, up to 5 seconds at 10%. Well, the math for that is 65 magic resist, okay? If your would-be target, after all your other items, was at 65 MR, well, let's say, or lower, if they were at 60 MR, 55 MR, 40, 30, 12, whatever, old Haunting Guise was better. If they have above 65 MR, new Haunting Guise is better. Now, this does not count the extra 10 AP. That means a little bit as well, but I didn't include that in the calculations because it matters per champion what you're doing. But to also point out that that's including the 5-second build up to the 10% damage increase. So for the Singes out there who are going to stay in combat for 7 years, and they liked building Haunting Guise into Liandry's, they are worse squishy killers. But if you're playing Azir or Cassio or Ryze or Victor, and you're playing a longer term team fight, and you get up to your 5-second duration, now you're at your 10% damage amp, well, you're a better tank killer than the old Haunting Liandry's build, if you chose to go Haunting Liandry's. You obviously don't have to, but if that was what you chose to do, that's what would happen. As far as Liandry's Torment itself, again, same changes. 15 flat pen is gone, exact same Magnus passive. The 2% current health becomes 1% max health, and it's the same item otherwise. Here is the Haunting Guise and Liandry's comparison. Old Haunting Guise, new Haunting Guise, old Liandry's, new Liandry's. Again, we talked about the math here about what the magic pen into damage amp is worth, and again, that breakpoint is 65 magic resist for the new build path to be better. As far as current health versus max health burn, that's obviously up for debate. Obviously, the 2% current versus 1% max, the breakpoint is at half HP, which means champions who are chasing Singed and getting lower and lower are losing more of their health now. But it also means that this is also a worse poke item, not only because of the way the magic pen into damage amp works, but also because it's not a current health burn, which would have been better for high health targets, aka the ones you would poke. Still has the same interaction with slowing effects, such as Riley's Crystal Scepter, still doubles it. That all is the same. Okay, the next major change is that they they basically added an item called Oblivion Orb. This is a carbon copy of the old Haunting Guise. If you wanted to go flat pen, the option is still there. It's called Oblivion Orb. Great. That exists, and it builds into the newly remade Morellonomicon. It is a new item. It does very similar things, okay? Forget what you know about old Morellos. Those became Hextech, GLP, Archangels, and all the other stuff. Hello to new Morellos, which is basically old Liandry's Torment with new stuff tacked on. Let's talk about this new thing. Old Liandry's at 8.3 versus new Morello's at 8.4. The AP is the same, the health is the same, the cost is almost the same, the magic pen's the same, but instead of the old 2% current health burn, you get grievous wounds at all health thresholds for 4 seconds. What this means is if you were playing an AP mage sort of assassin type, you are now good against Summoner Heal, and you are good against Soraka, and you're better against Janna. You now cut through healing by a virtue of being an assassin mage, which in most cases I think makes sense. There's some cases it doesn't, such as Dr. Mundo and Volibear, who flat pen is not good against. In fact, you'd rather build the newly improved Liandry's Torment, which is going to be better at killing those champions. But generally speaking, Grievous Wounds is now on an assassin item, which honestly to me makes sense. And it means if you do want to shut down Dr. Mundo or Volibear, you've got to take an inefficient 1v1 item to do so. Which I think is pretty reasonable. And either way, you are paying for this stat pretty much. You're paying roughly the right amount of money for the flat magic pen, by the way. And again, the breakpoint for the flat magic pen being good versus the Liandry's burn being good, or the Liandry's, the new Liandry's percent damage amp being good, is again at 65 magic resist. Alrighty. We've covered that. That's cool. We added some new items. Spellbinder now exists. It is basically the old build path of Luden's Echo, but now it has an active that gives you a bunch of AP and movement speed. And we also re-added Twin Shadows to the game, pretty much the old item that used to exist. Some AP, some move speed, some CDR, and it summons the spooky ghosts. And here we have that table of new items right here. As far as Spellbinder is concerned, definitely gold efficient. If you use the active basically at all, this sounds really good. By the way, for those who are curious, I mathed out the percent movement speed in a way that I think is accurate. So what I did is I took Boots of Speed and said, okay, you're paying, I think it's 12 gold per point of movement speed. I then took a champion with 335, which is 10 more than the minimum movement speed, which is reasonable for a mage, that's about right, and gave it Boots 2 and said, okay, well, how much movement speed does 1% movement speed give if I'm at 380 move speed? Well, obviously it gives 3.8. And 3.8 times 12 is a much larger number. It's roughly 45 per 1% move speed. And so 10% move speed is worth 450 gold. Those numbers are backed up by base stats, the multiplying stuff, getting boots of speed, getting tier 2. I'm pretty confident in that math right there. Basically, you can double or more the power of the item with the active. It only requires 100 spells, which means if you sit near chickens as your teammate Skarner kills them, you're getting extra stacks. If you are playing Vladimir and you're spamming Q on cooldown, you're getting extra stacks. If there's an Udyr in the game, you're getting extra stacks. If you're playing Ryze or Cassiopeia, you're getting extra stacks. Basically, the point of this item, because the other mage items are obviously efficient as well, is if you tend to cast a lot of spells or you're going to tend to teamfight a lot, Spellbinder is quite good. Will it be build defining? Probably. I expect it to see inclusion in some point in Cassiopeia's build, as long as she can fit it without, fighting against her need for magic pen and durability and whatnot, but I can see it. Also, the fact that this item can give you up to 40% move speed for 10 seconds, 10 base plus 30 on the active, means it's really good for teamfight mages. That's super, super good for let's pop this and just kite around a ton. That feels great. On the other side, I think Twin Shadows is a garbage item. I think this item does not have enough stats to be good. I don't think the active is really that amazing. Maybe I'm wrong and it's super sick. The fact that now everyone can buy Spooky Ghosts might buff Glacial Augment to some degree. I'm sure there's going to be some kind of good user there, but I would rather in basically every case for 2,400 gold, just buy Hextech GLP for only 600 more and have a generally better set of stats. But who knows, maybe I'm wrong. I've been wrong before. They also made some general updates to Void Staff, Rabadon's Death Cap, and Aurelia's Crystal Scepter. Void Staff and Rabadon's are basically multiplier items. I think they're going to fight for the same slot efficiency and slot space as new Liandry's and new Morellonomicon. But here is our set of items. Rabadon's Death Cap up at the very top. For the old Rabadon's to be good, you needed to have 36.3 AP. I think 36.3 AP total, which then got multiplied by 1/3, gave you about 12, and that's worth 270 gold. As long as you had, 40 AP from anywhere, which is basically impossible without having, before you got Rabadon's, and then the item was efficient, and then you went on from there. Okay, that wasn't too hard to make it efficient, but it wasn't a very exciting item. So they buffed the crap out of it. They buffed the amp to 40%, they buffed the cost by 200, now the item is gold efficient just by itself, and considering that basically what a 40% AP ratio amp means is essentially it means your AP ratios are 40% higher. Those are mathematically equivalent statements. This item is nuts. I think Rabadon's is probably overpowered, and every champion wants to buy it second or third. Like you buy your GLP or Ludenzek or whatever. Maybe you buy one other thing, like you rush Morello's because there's a lot of squishies on the team and there's a Zac jungle, and then you buy yourself a Rabadon's Death Cap. I really think so. Now, I think this is okay because it means that Magic Pen can be a better stat because you're not rushing Void Staff and you're not rushing Sork Trees and Haunting Guys and stuff. Okay, that's anti-synergy, but whatever. Moving on from that, I think Rabadon's is going to be nuts. I also think Aurelia's Crystal Scepter is slightly overbuffed as well. It gained 10 AP, so it is now gold efficient by itself. I know Aurelia's wasn't that common on its own, but I am worried about mages getting lots of slowing items considering they already have GLP. This seems a little scary to me. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm scared. And finally, they nerfed Void Staff by 10 ability power. So I also mathed out the cost of Magic Penetration by looking at both Old Haunting Guys and Sorcerer's Shoes. Magic Penetration costs about 30 gold per point of Magic Pen. That's roughly what it costs you to get the stat. And so for Void Staff to be worth that amount of gold of what you're paying for, in the old version, it was worth the payment if you were fighting against a target with 76 magic resist, all things considered. If they had 76 MR, you cut it down by 40%, great, that was worth the amount of magic pen you were paying for. After the nerfs, Void Staff is only gold efficient to the magic pen if you're fighting 95 MR. I expect Void Staff to basically disappear, honestly. Now, what is nice is because you're not going to run flat pen at all, it's a discussion you can have another point. I'm not going to dive into flat pen versus percent pen and how they synergize with one another because there's some level of multiplication, some level of not needing it quite as much. Either way, whatever. Ultimately, if you are up against some tanks and your only magic pen is Sork Shoes, it's not too hard for Void Staff to be efficient. But Void Staff is fighting slot efficiency against Liandry's Torment, and that's going to be an interesting discussion to have. And I'm not sure right off the bat which one's better. My bet, though, is Void Staff is a garbage can item now. We'll see. So that's the overall look at ability power items. To give a quick recap on that, basically there's a meaningful first item choice, and there's 4 of them. There's the 3 last chapter builds plus Rod of Ages, probably some other things around the corner as well. Items 2, 3, and 4 I think are meaningful as well because you've got a lot of interesting multipliers. You've got Anti-Squishy with the new Oblivion Orb into Merlinomicon. You've got Anti-Tank, which is basically Void Staff, but also new Haunted Guys in Leandri's Torment. You also got a purely generic multiplier, which is also arguably Leandri's Torment, but also Rabadon's Death Cap. You've also got the chance to go for some more utility with Rylo's Crystal Scepter, and there's really a lot of good things. Also, you can continue to go more generic by buying another CDR item, such as Archangels into Hextech GLP, because those items all have 500 mana on them, which is worth 15 bonus AP, which covers a fair bit of the fact that you're getting 10 less AP out of it. And really, I expect to see a lot of Archangel staff in the game overall. And of course, you still have the chance of old Zonias, of old Banshee's Veil, of all these other items. I think we're now in a world of richer AP itemization, and I'm happy about that. That'll be cool. Let's move on to the next topic, which is a bunch of top laners getting changed. Some good, some bad, some unneeded. Also, I want to point out that Press the Attack is going to have some buffs to it that are going to buff top lane. Things to watch out for. Okay, so Darius has a shorter cooldown on his W until it's maxed out, and it has a higher damage output on W, anything above rank 1 of the ability. Here's the table right there. Currently, Darius maxes W last because the only incentive on live is the cooldown. With it increasing in damage value, this might change a little bit. In fact, I expect that to happen somewhat, but here's the table. Great, they're straight buffs. Apprehend, 5% more armor pen on it. Here's the buffs right here. Normally max Apprehend second. That could, of course, change. Excuse me, as well. I chose Darius as the example champion in this case. Darius goes from 39 to 107 armor, which feels like a pretty reasonable sort of scope one way or the other. Also want to point out that because Darius buys Black Cleaver, he's already got percent armor pen more or less in his build, which slightly lowers the need for this item or this stat. I reasonably expect Darius to max W second a decent portion of the time as a result of these changes. And Darius is stronger, that's great. He's slightly weak, cool. Next up, Gangplank getting nerfed, Parlay, more mana cost, everything but rank 5. Also, Powder Kegs no longer reveal anything around them, and they last much less long. These are nice Gangplank nerfs. I don't think he needed all of them. I think the E nerf could have been fine, but here's the Gangplank cost nerf. No, that's Gnar, sorry, I scrolled too far down. Here's the cost nerf. It matters, of course, until level 9, but meaningfully so. For now, he's still poaching Relic Shield, and just cues you in the face until he runs out of mana. He will do that much more quickly now, and that's a good thing. I think the barrel nerfs are definitely really important for anti-melee matchups. He can't just sit a barrel behind him, camp on it, and then when you go for the aggression, he's got a barrel that he just chains into you and you get effed up. So that's really good. Nerfs to Boomerang Throw, buffs to Hop for Gnar. Gnar is definitely a pretty abusive top laner for pro. He's actually slightly weak for solo queue, to be honest. So I'm glad there's some level of compensatory buffs, but I don't think they're enough. I think Gnar goes further down in level in solo queue, but certainly meaningful nerfs in pro play. This is the Gnar Q nerf. It's a really big deal. It's a 9% nerf, or 9% increase in the cooldown at rank 1. It scales with the rank in his ultimate. 9 becomes 20, becomes 33, becomes 71%. The cooldown on Boomerang goes from 3.5 to 6, which honestly is really meaningful. Keep in mind, he normally wields 20% CDR, which moves the 3.5 even lower to like 2 and change, which is basically just permanent slows. The 6 will become more like a 5 and change or 4 and change, which maybe is a bit more room around here. Keep in mind also that later on, Frozen Mallet is getting nerfed in this patch, so Gnar is a much less perma-slow type champion, which is only a good thing for the kit. And if Gnar gets buffed somewhere else down the line, I'm fine with it because perma-slow is bullshit. As far as Hop's damage going up, Hop is typically maxed last, so he's going to keep those benefits for quite a while. Also, Hop has I believe it's a max health ratio of him, the champion, on it. This also counts Crunch, the Mega Gnar version, but it means he's got more all-in power, which is quite nice, including into Mega Gnar form, because Crunch can deal damage as well. So his all-ins are a bit better, his poke is a bit worse. Great. They did some level of compensation buff. It's not enough to make Gnar good in solo queue, but whatever. Big changes to Ornn that I'm very happy about. I think he's going to become weaker as a champion, which I'm not necessarily happy about because I think he's weak for solo queue, but I think design-wise they are good. So the cooldown is getting stretched at early ranks for Bellows Breath. The damage is actually higher rank 1, but lower at rank 5 for W, but by the time the damage is lower, the cooldown is only matched. I like the shield duration is going up for a more defensive option, the brittle duration going down, which helps people playing against him be less offended by how pretty impossible it is to deal with the champion. So here's this. There's the cooldown difference. Right now, Ornn maxes W first. Because of the cooldown difference going from 13.9 to 17.9, I expect that to still be the same case, even though the level incentive has gone down. I think also keep in mind that because your targets are brittle for less long, you have less chance to auto-attack them for the brittle, and thus the damage goes down even further. But here is the damage contribution to the ability overall. I chose Ornn for the base stats because it's a purely percent max health ratio. A fairly meaningful damage hit. 11% is not the most insane, but is still a meaningful nerf, of course. And that 11% carries throughout the game. There's no extra ratio carrying that floats it back up. So certainly meaningful nerf there. So Ornn's W is just a worse ability. It just truly is, and that's fine because that was like the abusive ability. What they did, there was some very large changes to Searing Charge. They bumped the base damage, but they removed the shockwave damage. Basically, the shockwave just deals the base damage in and of itself. So here's what it looks like. You don't have to collide with terrain to double hit anymore. In fact, double hitting is gone. So if you only ever landed the charge, your damage is roughly doubled or more, and the ratio is increased as well. Also, by the way, he normally maxed E last. With these buffs, and I do think they're buffs, he might change his tune and max E second. And maybe we're really in a world where he ignores W and maxes E first. I don't think that's true, but there is a world where Ornn becomes a QE champion and doesn't rely on W so much. I can see it happening. I think it's possible. I really do think it's possible. If you were only ever hitting the shockwave, if somehow you never hit the charge, he was like behind your pillar or near a wall, well, the shockwave damage is still up 60 to 25%, and again, the ratio is up by 1/3. So in many, many cases, if you only ever hit one tick of the E, it is meaningfully increased in damage. This is a 260 base damage ability with a 0.4, I think it is, bonus armor and bonus MR ratio. This can do a lot of damage. Honestly, it really, really can. But if you were getting perfect ease off, where you were hitting the shockwave and the charge on a perfectly CC'd target, maybe it was through your ultimate or something, you landed the R charge, you pressed Q, you E'd into them, whatever it was, I don't know, in which case your perfect E's are worse. But if you're maxing it last, the damage is the same, and if you're maxing it earlier, then okay, that's when it starts really getting cut down. But I think this is an E buff, and I'm glad that more of Ornn's power is going away from his W, because I do still believe in the average case this is a buff to his E. It's one more resource he needs to commit to win his fights, and this seems like a good thing. The one thing I will say, by the way, is Ornn's all-in damage in the early game did go up, because technically W does more damage in the very early ranks. E does more damage, especially as a rank 1 ability, and if you can set up with Q, then the more the merrier. So there's a chance that Ornn is a slightly better very early lane bully, but there's more winners to play against him, so I think it's generally fine. Next up, very minor buffs to Poppy in both her passive and her E damage. So there's the Poppy passive throw. This, of course, includes her base attack move, because you literally have to include that. So, okay, that's great. It, of course, falls off, but until you're level 18, it's a straight buff. So, hey, Poppy throws her shields for more damage, which also helps her last hitting, which can be valuable. Don't want to, disinclude that. Last hitting is definitely an important thing for Poppy. Even for support Poppy, it's a little bit, more of a window where you can land that. Here's her E damage, an ability that is normally maxed second, as far as I can tell. Obviously, that could change, but I don't think it will. And, hey, a bit more damage is always nice. Of course, this ability damage can be doubled in the end of the day, so that's kind of cool. Next up, buffs to base Q and empowered Q. Here's the numbers right here. Great. Renekton's a bit weak. Gets more damage. Cool. Not going to affect his healing. He does more damage. That's wonderful. Jack's bug fix. That's quite nice. Frozen Mallet slow from 30 to 20% on range is anti-Gnar. It does hurt Urgot a bit, but Urgot's doing generally fine. Hurts Kog'Maw a bit, but I don't really care. I think Kog'Maw should have to build attack damage items, so screw him. Doesn't matter to me. I think this is fine. And, I think Frozen Mallet is salvageable as a ranged item, as long as it's not really, really abusive. Maybe the item should have a cooldown on it, and it only slows once in a while. Maybe it's a 4-hit passive, maybe at some point you can design work this thing, but I think Frozen Mallet can exist without being locked to melee only. Okay, so Evelyn's getting 15 damage straight up on her E and 25 damage straight up on her empowered E. And remember, in 8.2, there were a lot of changes to Evelyn's E, so what happened? Well, let's take the quick check on just how much damage E deals. Now, what this is again, an ability that Evelyn maxes last, which she still will, because they've not added a level incentive in any meaningful way. It's an ability that Evelyn maxes last, and I chose Evelyn herself as the primary target, as a champion that goes from about 600 to 2,000 max HP. Here's the unempowered numbers, here's the empowered numbers. It's a 20 to 10% damage amp before ability power ratios. Great. What about the changes from 8.1 to 8.2 to 8.4? What's this mean? Well, again, I took Evelyn as the example target, and here is the old damage, which was the buffed numbers. Here's the damage after the immediate nerfs, and here's the damage after the recompense. And basically, this breaks even at 1500 HP. If you have a 0 ability power Evelyn, for whatever magical reason, if somehow you don't have any ability power, 8.4 is weaker than 8.1 after 1500 HP. So back when Evelyn was super OP and super strong and very broken, compared to now, at squishy targets, she's actually better at killing them, and against tanky targets, she's worse. For the empowered version, this breakpoint is even lower. It's at 1250. And after 1250 health on her target, it is a worse ability than it was back in 8.1. But consider that the old AP ratio nerf of AP ratio becomes percent health damage, every 100 AP becomes this much more damage, has still gone down. So 0 AP Evelyn is nerfed after 1500 health on her target, or 1250 on her target. You consider the fact that there's an ability power ratio you have to care about, that further pushes that number down. And honestly, this continues to sharpen the champion as anti-squishy and not so much anti-tank. Certainly Evelyn can one-shot people. That can be very scary. I've faced some Evelyns. It's a scary champion. She's going to be very good at killing squishies. She's going to be really good at that, and that's going to be scary. And me as a Twitch player is going to have to deal with that. But she doesn't gain a lot against tanks is what it comes down to. Okay, let's move on. Fiddlesticks, and I really do love these fiddle changes. Now, I don't know if Fiddle Main's going to say it's not enough, how dare you, but I think these are very good Fiddlesticks changes. Okay, so E is straight buffed and cooldown. That's quite nice. They buff the bonus damage to monsters, make them a better jungler, and remove the bonus damage to minions, which I am very happy about, because lane Fiddlesticks, specifically Middlesticks, was the best Fiddlesticks, and Jungle Fiddle was weak. So that's kind of lame. So here is Jungle Fiddle, who normally maxes E last because they want to drain camps to heal and then rank Fear as a primary crowd control. Well, great, you get a very significant cooldown buff to the ability as a result, and the damage output against jungle monsters is a nice 33% higher. Your ability now deals 130 damage to every monster. It's plus 32.5. That's a really meaningful amount of increased damage. Great, have fun. And what's also nice is that this is one of those few buffs that also multiply the AP ratio. So the AP ratio is also 33% higher, which is great for Jungle Fiddle. His Jungle Clear is very clearly much better, and that's awesome. How about Lane Fiddlesticks? Sorry, screw you. Lane Fiddlesticks used to max at first, so the cooldown reduction gains fall off after level 9, and the damage output to minions is a paltry 145 at max rank instead of the old 218 it was before. Or 217.5, I suppose, if you're really pedantic about it. Which is, of course, a cut in 1/3 of the damage, because that's how math works. And great, Middlesticks has much worse wave clear. Screw that guy, he was lame anyway. Considering the cooldown buffs still exist, I don't think Middlesticks is a dead champion, especially because also there is a buff to his ultimate right here, very substantially so. I think Middlesticks is probably still viable, just less abusive. And Jungle Fiddle, plus even Support Fiddle to a certain degree, got very big buffs. I love this change, and I used to be a Fiddle main back in beta. I was one of a few well-known Fiddle jungle mains back in like 2009, 2010. I since gave up the champion when I became more of an AD carry main, but I always have a soft spot for Fiddlesticks. I do love the champion, and I love that he has a freaking 80-second cooldown Crow Storm at max rank. That, by the way, is nuts. That's super good. What's nice is he gets the gain even at rank 1 of the ability, which, again, is harder for Support Fiddle to use. And he only got 10 seconds off at rank 1, which, again, he's going to be at for most of the game until level 11, which takes a very long time for a support player. But for Jungle Fiddle, who can gain some levels, that is a freaking substantial cooldown buff. And because the ability is so unreliable in the first place, and because Vision has crept up overall in the game, and that's a topic for another day, it's been harder for Fiddlesticks to get in on teams overall. Teams got better, they got more coordinated, it's harder for Fiddle to ambush people, and so this happened. And hey, this is pretty sweet. Maybe he makes good use out of Spooky Ghost and Glacial Augment, and things get really magical for him. I don't know, maybe he's a really good Riley's user, and that item got buffed, and now he's happy. I don't really know, I don't think so, though. Either way, this is super sick, and I'm happy for Fiddlesticks players to get this. Next up, major changes to Callista. All right, I'm going to break this down into 2 parts, okay? Actually, 3 parts. Okay, part 1, her attack range went down 25. That's it. A bit of a weaker laner, bit of a bit weaker champion in teamfights. For someone who's very mobile, she can be caught out a bit more, so it's more, if I can close the gap, now I can do things to you. Cool. I mean, yes, this is a nerf. This makes the champion weaker. Woe is her. The second set of changes are all basically together. These are all the same change, okay? Her base attack damage went down by 5, but Oathsworn now gives 5 attack damage at rank 1. Okay, so as long as she's near her Oathsworn for W, and it's rank 1, which starts at level 3 usually, same AD. Cool. And in fact, at levels 14, 15, 17, and 18, she gains 5, 10, 15, 20 more attack damage. So in fact, it's a late game Callista buff. Now, maybe not so much a buff as the attack range nerf, but theoretically, she has more stats. Okay, there's that change. But what about this? Callista no longer gains bonus attack speed near Oathsworn. Well, she also gained attack speed growth and base attack speed, which are the same change, and they roughly counteract. So let's look at this. Here's the attack speed changes to Callista. If she, the left side of this chart, by the way, is when not near her Oathsworn. Obviously, her base attack speed going up and her attack speed scaling going up means she is substantially faster than before. If you're away from your Oathsworn, you have between 8 and 21% more attack speed than before. That is really, really substantial. That means quite a lot. That means a lot. And as I look for my notes on Callista, as I'm looking for it, I'm not finding it. She has 7.8% more gains from attack speed items as a result of her base attack speed buff, right? Like her total like a multiplier of things is 7.8% higher. The actual attack speed gained from the kit and base stats is basically identical, as you're seeing here. Now, here's what her attack speed is and would be near her Oathsworn, which again, you rank up W at level 3, and the stats kick in, which is why it plummets. And because champion stats scale in a sort of parabolic fashion, they don't scale linearly, whereas the Oathsworn attack speed did scale linearly, there is a dip in those middle levels here. Between levels 3 and about level 13, technically you do have slightly less attack speed because it doesn't quite keep up with itself from before. However, as soon as you buy any attack speed items at all, which you're going to because you're going to build Blade of the Ruined King and a Hurricane and probably Berserker's Greaves, this chart becomes green. I didn't include the math with items because I didn't choose to, but in the real world, this becomes green because her items are better. Great. Okay. So let's look at her attack damage. Again, we look at her attack damage away from the Oathsworn, and I want to, and of course it's lower because she's missing her 5 AD. Okay, whatever. And here's her Oathsworn AD, which as soon as you rank it up, it's equal, and then as soon as you get to max rank, it's higher. We've gone over that. Cool, let's move on. So what you really care about is what about her DPS as a champion? Well, when alone from her support, she is actually stronger. She is less reliant on being near her Oathsworn. She is straight buffed when not near the Oathsworn. That's a pretty big deal. Your support goes and roams. Callista is a stronger champion than before. Full out, period, full stop, stronger champion. Not even counting the base attack, which makes her better items better. On the other side of it, if she is fighting with her Oathsworn, because this is a yellow and this was a negative, she is slightly weaker before you count items in and of themselves. What I'm curious about is if there's theoretically a chance that she ranks W second for this. And keep in mind, W also has that percent health on team hit passive. And Sentinels are slightly stronger as well. There is a chance she maxes W second instead of Q second because now there's an extra level incentive on W. I don't think so, but there is a chance it does happen. There is a chance that it happens. And I'm curious to see if it's actually good. Small hurt to her E refund on mana. I mean, ultimately, these really are early game nerfs to the champion. Okay. The one other thing I want to point out as a small conclusion is the goal of even doing this shuffling right here was to make her attack speed not change when her Oathsworn went away, because attack speed is a very finicky stat. Feel is very important, even though Callista is one of the best kiters because it's pretty much brainless actually kiting people. I'm cool to see this. Now, I don't think they're getting these gains of like making her worse in competitive and better in solo queue. I don't really see that. Maybe I'm wrong, and making her less attached to her support is actually going to help her in solo queue. I don't agree with the theory that attack range is a very pro-sensitive stat, but maybe I'm wrong, and we really do get gains there. I'm not sure. But they are nerfing her lane bullying. That is a hard fact. Next up, a half revert of the Kog'Maw W nerf from the previous patch. Makes sense. He'll be above 50%. The damage chart is right here. I used Kog'Maw as his example champion. This doesn't really matter. Whatever. Kog'Maw's going to be fine. A partial rework or revert of the Rengar rework. The Q is going back to the old form. He's got some base stat changes. He's got Unseen Predator buffs to his Bone Tooth Necklace. The leap is a bit different, a whole bunch of stuff. There's a voice response. This Q is new. Battle Roar has a better cooldown. Thrill the Hunt has some different things. There's a lot going on, and it doesn't really suit spreadsheets to talk about very much. The only thing I will do is just quickly look at Rengar's base attack damage changes and is better in the late game. His attack speed is better quite a bit as well in the early and late game. And Bone Tooth Necklace is actually less important to him as the flat AD is gone and more or less compensates for the fact that his AD went up by 22. So did this bonus attack damage. So basically, pretty much the passive AD gains are exactly what Unseen Predator used to give him on the Bone Tooth Necklace. Either way, going to be an interesting champion. I encourage you to try him out. He should be interesting. All right, Shyvana is both strong and a good user of Press the Attack, and Press the Attack is getting ostensibly buffed in the next patch, so her AD is going down and Twin Bite damage is going down. Now, I don't like that her attack damage is going down because I like when melee auto-attackers have high base AD, outside of very specific examples like Hecarim that I think gets a pass because he's such a good Triforce user. I don't like that she's down to 114, which is kind of on the low side for melee auto-attackers. I would rather find cuts in other places, but oh well, such is life. Small nerf to her base attack damage. This is her Q damage, counting her base attack damage decrease as well, but being a percent of total AD as a thing, these percentages will remain the same regardless of what her build is going to look like. Overall, her damage output with auto attacks is very obviously down because, well, guess what? She's gaining damage to press the attack. The goal, by the way, of these changes are to keep champions like Shyvana at the same win rate while using their best keystone, which is PTA. So theoretically, Shyvana shouldn't go anywhere, although I think she could use an actual nerf as a champion. Small buffs to Swain, his mana cost on his maxed last, Vision of Empire. There's the mana cost buff. Bam. You save 20 mana for a while. That's cool. Small buffs to his R healing. Great. There's the chart there. Small buffs. Again, this has an AP ratio attached to it, and the AP ratios for Swain are pretty generous. They want him to build somewhat Glass Cannon full AP, so that's probably going to happen. And okay, he's going to be stealing a bit more health, and that keeps him alive a bit longer. That's nice. I like that quite a lot. I'm also very happy that if you died during the quarter-second cast animation of the R, you get the full refund because that was lame. You did not get the bonus health on the start of cast, only the end of cast, so you really could die during the quarter-second. It was rough stuff. That was lame. Ultimate Hat apparently didn't reduce the cooldown properly. I don't know if that meant it was too good or too bad, but either way, that's now happening. Slight buff on the rank 1, level 6 threshold for reactivating the R. Okay, great. And then a really minor little quality of life thing that aims slightly forward if he's running with high move speed. All right, now we move on to Talon. Talon lost armor, gained MR. I actually don't like this champion having a unique base MR as a champion. I personally dislike that, but too late, it's happening. Basically, here's his physical durability versus magic durability. It is a very negligible cut in his physical defense. It is really that 2 to 1%. It means almost nothing, but technically, yes, he's weaker against Zed now. But it's a pretty meaningful 5% durability increase against magic damage. Now, this decrease is less important if you buy a Hexdrinker, more important if they buy Sork Shoes. But the reason I don't like the base stat changes is I don't like that he just arbitrarily has different MR than every other champion in the game. I think you actually could have accomplished this same difference in physical and magic durability by changing his base health instead, and then nerfing his armor by slightly more. I actually looked at Champion's base health numbers, and you actually could have gotten him to a somewhat within reason base health value. It would have been like the second or third highest in the game, but not the actual highest. He would have been still within the band with a normal MR, but I don't know. I have weird feelings about base stats, so don't dwell on that too much for me. He's going to be better against mages, which is where Talon tends to live in mid lane anyway. Small little minor nerfs to Tristana's R cooldown. This here was where it is. It's 20 to 40% nerf. This does matter to some degree. I mean, a 2-minute long cooldown is still pretty long for a champion that definitely doesn't level up quickly. Being in a dual lane, level 11 takes some time. Also, the level incentive has been reduced by quite a bit as well, so it's going to really stay quite high. Yeah, I mean, Tristana is certainly quite strong. I think Tristana should become much less of a late game carry, and the R scaling less well helps that. But I mean, I want to see Tristana's range not reach 700. I want to see 650 or 625. Maybe you buff the E, maybe you buff her early attack damage in the mid game somehow or something. I'm not sure quite what, but I would like if Tristana were more caster based and a bit more E based, a bit more turret killing based, and less of a late game hyper carry, because I think Twitch and Jinx and Kog'Maw or to fill that role in healthier ways than Tristana, who has the most range and the most safety and like some of the best steroids in the game. So I would like to see more design work on Trist, but still a good nerf to see. All right, so Twitch is getting the base damage on his E nerfed, but his damage per stack and AD ratio unchanged. Here's the math on this, by the way. Contaminate can have between 1 and 6 stacks. If you only stack once, the base damage is cut pretty considerably, not counting the AD ratio. If you have 6 stacks, the base damage is cut much less considerably, and of course, again, not counting the AD ratio. Honestly, a 6-stack ability still does 250 damage with a like 1.15 or something total AD ratio. It's actually more than that. It's like 1.35 or something stupid. Yeah, I mean, it's 0.25 per stack, which means it's a 1.5 total AD ratio. This thing is carried by the total AD ratio. Twitch can get a lot of damage out of that E. The 250 base damage is not that meaningful. So yeah, it's a nerf, but I think the nerf is overstated in general because he is a BF sword first kind of champion. The ability is going to do plenty of damage all in and of itself without major issues. I think he's going to be just fine. And that said, Twitch is also slightly overpowered, even with his suboptimal keystone of Fleet Footwork. Being that press attack is getting buffed, it's even more meaningful here, and I think he's still going to lose win rate overall. He's going to shift more towards press the attack, which is, in my opinion, a good thing, because you have some variance, and that's quite nice, and cool. Volibear changes, oh baby. I want to point out that it was very much intentional that Volibear does have to rank up Q to get the move speed. It being a 1-point wonder, I think, was very unhealthy for the champion, so I'm glad that it's changing. He's getting a little bit of away move speed even with the rank up, and a lot more move speed while running towards champions. Also, the movement speed will decay more slowly when you turn around. So here is the table on the Q movement speed. Now, what I'm doing here with the table is not how valuable is the buff, it's his total move speed before diminishing returns as a result of the changes. So going from 1.15 to 1.3, right? Wait, what am I... Oh, I'm an idiot and did... Oh, sorry. This is... Oh, I screwed stuff up, by the way. I included some bad numbers here, and I apologize. This should have been 30 to 50, not this. I made some mistakes. This chart is bad, and I'll upload a different one here. The away we can still track, which is the same at the very early game, and then a bit better later on. But I done goofed here. I don't know how I screwed that up, but I did, so this will have to be redone. Suffice it to say, though, a 15% movement speed increase, which is what you'll see at... actually, I guess it's a 0 to 10% movement speed increase. It's not absolutely that massive. 0 to 10% movement speed increase is, I guess, kind of more minor than I'm giving it credit for in this chart, but still does exist. He still will be a little bit faster. The thing I'm really excited for is this E change to Volibear, where now enemies who are dashing or airborne when you're casting Majestic Roar get knocked out, right? It does a slight knockback. It knocks them out of their dashes. It knocks them out of their airborne to a certain degree, and it deals a lot of bonus damage. You still might want to max Q second, but you've now got a compelling reason to max E as well. In the present day, people actually maxed E last anyway, but is a very meaningful damage increase. I mean, this thing is a 360 base damage if they're knocked into the air. And keep in mind, your Q, that has been freshly buffed, knocks things into the air. So your Q sets up a 360 base damage ability, which is a nuts amount of base damage. You may end up considering keeping Q at a 1-point wonder and being slow and just relying on Righteous Glory and maybe Predator or something, but you got some frickin' burst damage when you flip them over your head and then smack them with Majestic Roar. This is a lot of burst. It is a meaningful amount of burst. Keep in mind your W, which exists, but the numbers aren't listed here, does more damage based on how injured they are, which means the more burst you do, the more damage your W would do after the fact. I think this is meaningful. I really do. Changes to Xin Zhao, another press the attack user, loses damage on his passive, but they buffed. So W is very weird. It has a base cast speed, which is going from 0.6 to 0.5, and there is a minimum cast speed at a certain amount of bonus attack speed gained. That top end, like, shortened cast whatever with max attack speed, the breakpoint and timing for that did not change. So you're reaching the same endpoint at the bottom, but you're starting at a slightly better spot with the cast speed. So W is a slightly more usable ability. Also, you can now W flash and move the ability where you couldn't before. That's a nice little buff. Your E in melee range will now move you slightly more properly as well. That's cool. But of course, he's getting his passive being nerfed by a pretty meaningful amount due to the fact that he is a press the attack user and press the attack is being buffed. So both some script edits that are nice for him and some actual damage nerfs. This is the passive damage including his total attack damage because that's how it works. You do bonus damage on a strike, but here's what the strike deals. And it is a pretty meaningful damage cut. So, okay, cool. And again, it's a percent of total AD, so this ratio more or less subsides or exists throughout the rest of through the rest of his life. Small buffs to Zed's death mark. That's really nice. Keep in mind that mages are potentially theoretically weaker. It really depends on what they're doing. Some could be weaker, some could be stronger. I'm not sure. It might be that mages are all just ubiquitously stronger, in which case then Zed is weaker by comparison because he's not a mage. But rank 2 and 3 ultimate going down on cooldown is nice. More chance to be repeatable, which is always cool. I think assassins deserve to have shorter cooldowns because they're kind of by nature one-on-one champions. Nerfs to Zoe, and oh god, I think Zoe is going to be a garbage can. I think there are some design wins and a lot of big nerfs. So first, my theory on Zoe. Once again, I think Zoe is not overpowered. For as much as the changes in 7.3 got memed on, XD 0.25, they actually had a meaningful impact in her win rate. She was meaningfully inconvenienced by the fact that her first 8 levels were a lot weaker. Turns out the first 8 levels matter. Your laning phase matters. Who would have thought? So the actual win rate difference was like 1.5% down. So Zoe is actually weak for basically everyone, except Pro, but Pros are slow to adapt, and she might not even be that good in Pro either. Now that is not to say that she's not frustrating. Getting one shot feels like shit. I understand that. I agree with that. It does feel like shit. She's just not on the overall a strong champion. So what they're doing is some design wins, okay? They're getting rid of teleport jumping from minions because that shit was dumb. Absolutely agree. That was dumb. They are getting rid of her Q damage to the effect of about 20%. Yeah, we'll go into that real quick. Here's the Q single target damage and the AP ratio change, right? Because the Q damage got changed, more sparkle got changed, the AP ratio of both abilities got changed. Here's her Q single target damage. As soon as she reaches level 5, it is 20% cut for the rest of the game. Base damage, AP ratio, you name it, 20% less damage on Q from level 5 and beyond. That's the change. First 4 levels, in some cases actually stronger, but whatever. Her AoE damage, freaking gutted. Starts lower, gets even lower. Her AoE damage is just destroyed. This is a 105 base damage ability. Yes, the multiplier is insane at long ranges. Yes, of course, that totally exists. But the AP ratio cut down to about 1/3. The base damage cut somewhere between 2/3, 1/2, and 1/3. She lost a crap ton of wave clear. And I know that coming into the game, part of the goal with designing the champion and putting her out in the public was that she was supposed to have some weak wave clear. They clearly made a mistake because her wave clear was really good. She one-shot casted at level 5. She no longer one-shots casted at level 5. That is gone. If you want to go to her old level 5 ability damage, she has to hit level 9, and even then it's not as good. 131 base damage in the old version, 105 base damage for the AoE in the new version. Worse wave clear. Ratio lower as well, obviously. Massive, 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 massive changes. So her wave clear is freaking destroyed. Her single target damage is down by 20%. We're not done. They removed the E refund mechanic on hitting a champion. I actually wish it went the other way. I wish they kept the refund mechanic and just nerfed the base cooldown of the ability. Because I would rather the missing it and it being a trap be more punished. That's my opinion on it. That said, they removed a mechanic from the tooltip, which has its own gains in making the champion less complex. Because now when you're playing against a champion, it has a reliable cooldown of 16 to 14 instead of 14 to 9.8, and even that changed based on context. So I can understand arguments for either change. I just would have instinctually said, let's nerf the base cooldown of the ability, but that's up to them. Okay, but there were compensation. Oh, and one more thing that's actually really, really important, by the way, is Sleepy Trouble Bubble now no longer sleeps you if you remove Drowsy, and I'm assuming this also affects Black shielding the champion between Drowsy and Sleep. I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing it does. Either way, this probably should have existed from the very beginning. I really think it should have existed. I think this is a failure that it didn't because it just meets player expectations, and it's honestly more frustrating for the player than it is cool for Zoe. So I'm glad it's here now. I regret the fact that it wasn't here earlier. Okay, but in response, there are compensation buffs, and this is where I think a lot of the design win comes in. The design wins come in, because I think Zoe is best served as a more mid-range mage who's picking up summoner spells, making cool plays, using a Lichbane, and doing fun stuff. That, I think, is the cooler Zoe than Paddlestar one-shot Zoe. So I again think there are design wins in this set, even though I think Zoe's in the dumpster and they have more work to do. So Paddlestar went down 20% damage, but let's look at things that did happen. Zoe's health went up by about 34, which throughout the entirety is really meaningful. What's crazy is her base health is freaking nuts already. 2,090, unless I did the math wrong, which I'm actually virtually certain I didn't, is nuts for a ranged champion, and got even higher at 2124. This is dumb high. Evelyn is melee and has less health than this champion. I mean, almost everyone has less health than this champion. This is a stupidly high amount of HP. And I wish they found a different way to make her more durable, because, again, I like base stats being neat and orderly, and this is certainly not that. That said, they do want her to be able to get in the thick of things more, and so she will. I don't know if her armor is out of line, if her MR is out of line, I don't know, but whatever. They also buffed her AD by 2, and generally speaking, buffed more Sparkles. And more Sparkles is, again, the Lichbane passive after casting every single spell. So here is her attack damage plus more Sparkles damage in 8.3 versus her attack damage plus more Sparkles damage in 8.4. It's a very big bump in the mid-game. It's a 16% damage bump at its highest point. That's really meaningful. Her Lichbane auto-attack, whatever, went up by 20, which is 16%. But beyond that, the AP ratio on more Sparkles went up by 30%. Which means she's definitely doing a lot more with the Lichbane-y fun stuff. Which I think, again, is a design win. She is now using her auto-attack, more Sparkles, cool stuff. And what's nice is that triggers when she presses R, it triggers when she presses Q, it triggers when she presses E. She's incentivized to weave her Lichbane in more often. Now, I did not check how many triggers it would require to replace her old Q damage. In fact, that scales with distance anyway, so good luck to you figuring that one out regardless. But I think it's cool that she has this amplified. There's also a buff to Spell Thief. The early movement speed is just straight higher. I mean, it's the ability that you keep at rank 1 at the beginning of the game and leave it there until level 14. So just a lot more movement speed bonus out of the ability. That's useful. The ability power ratio, 50% higher as well. Right? Shoots these, stars out when you cast your summoner spell or cast someone else's summoner spell. These are nice buffs. So non-trivial buffs to W, non-trivial buffs to her auto attacks, non-trivial buffs to her base stats. But Q lost 20% damage, and her wave clear lost like 60%. So they're pushing her towards the combat mage, which I am happy about. That's the cooler place that she lives. But she will almost certainly be in the dumpster in the meantime. And that's okay. They'll do more later. All right. One minor thing. Mages no longer do 5 extra attack. Everyone no longer does 5 extra attack damage to minions. This hurts AD carries the least. It hurts mages and junglers the least, then bot lane marksmen, then AD assassins, because they have so much attack damage anyway, they won't notice for the most part, then AP mages, then tanks. Also, like AD bruisers and stuff are part of the AD assassin group, but they have so much attack damage, it doesn't matter. Juggernauts have like 170 attack damage anyway. Really not that meaningful. Again, it probably does hurt the classes that people love to hate the most, and really this is not going to be much regardless, so who cares? Ancient Coin is a garbage item, by the way. This is not enough to make them good, I don't think. 5 then 10 move speed is really just not that good. But even on champions like Janet and Strzok, it's like a 4% win rate difference between an Ancient Coin start and a Spell Thief start. It would be fun to go back and look at the changes from like 6.23, 24, 7.1 and whatnot. Because I remember actually doing patch rundowns during like the postseason, like while Worlds was happening, and being like, guys, I'm pretty sure Ancient Coin is already worse than Spell Thieves. Like, people kept memeing on how Ancient Coin is the best and it earned so much money. Oh my god, look how much money Ancient Coin earned me. And those numbers went nowhere, but they just buffed, like, Spell Thieves to give CDR and shit, and no one noticed. Like, I don't remember if Worlds 2017 had CDR on Spell Thieves or not, but there's a chance it did, and no one bothered. As far as solo queue, I know that existed and no one bothered, and people were wrong. So, anyway, I think these buffs are not enough to make these items good enough, but It's a start, it's going in the right direction, and eventually, you know, there will be parity, but until it's as good on like a Janna and Soraka as other items, you're not going to see this item for a while. Further nerfs to Relic Shield, I don't really feel like it needs this. Like, this feels like a very finicky change that it is actually not important for solo queue because the best solo queue junglers right now, outside of Sion, are all enchanters anyway. It's Nami and Janna and Sona and Soraka in these types. So nerfing tanks by 25 health in lane and 50 health in mid game, I don't think is helping solo queue, and I don't think it's the kind of change that's going to be meaningful in pro play either. I really, really don't. The change I think is meaningful in pro play is Remnant of the Aspect getting a meaningful nerf. It now costs the same amount of gold as the Eye of the Watchers type. And it's getting a pretty meaningful health cut. Now, I do want to point out, by the way, that this is not as big of a nerf as it looks. Wow, 100 gold for 150 health? That's massive. Well, keep in mind, the item it builds out of was already nerfed. So what you're really looking at is the choice to go Remnant of the Aspect, which is here. So before, you were stupid to not buy the item. This item was dumb gold efficient. Even if you didn't count the health regen, you got 325 HP and 10 CDR for about 1,000 gold. Wait, what am I? Something's... Oh yeah, Ruby Crystal plus combined cost. For about 1,000 gold, you got dumb amounts of stats. Plus some health regen, and this item was just... You were literally trolling if you weren't getting this item every game out of tank. Because it was way too gold efficient. That crap was pretty silly. So now it's in a spot where you're getting, you're paying 100 less gold, but you're getting 100 less health, you're still getting the CDR, and it's still very, very gold efficient, but you have to value the health regen at least 100 gold. Well, you have to value the health regen, the buffs to execute, and the fourth ward at 100 gold, which you still will, which means Remnant of the Aspect is still overpowered, and you're still probably going to buy it every single game. It's just less overpowered, and to me, that seems fine. I'm okay with that as a player. I play support sometimes in my secondary role. I play tank sometimes. This item was OP. Every support should have bought it first, and to be honest, they probably still should. Tracker's Knife removed from the game is a very big deal, and one that I'll cover more in depth in the future in a different video. I think this is not the place for it personally. What I will say is I think there is too much vision in pro play, and that this change will help make the game more exciting. This will also mandatorily add combat stats to junglers because they will grab blue and red smite, and so junglers will do more damage and be better fighters and have more gank power, which is going to make more action. Junglers going to go screw you up. What it will also do, I think, slightly, is bridge the gap in dueling power between tank and fighter junglers, right? Zac grabs a red smite and is now less screwed by Kha'Zix. That is... You could argue that's a good change or a bad change. I think tank jungler players will be happy that they can duel more easily and actually have more damage to their gank, which is kind of nice in all times. And the Kha'Zix players might be very sad, but they might enjoy, you know, having chilling smite for their duels. You can't get away. I'm not really sure, but whatever. Again, as far as the vision, actual impact on the game, I will cover that another time. I think it's a good change, though. All right, Wit's End. Getting straight buffed for melee and probably straight nerfed for range. So 100 gold cheaper, 2 more damage, more MR stolen, more max MR stolen as well. So Wit's End just became a much better item, to be honest. It just became a better item. I actually, by the way, decided to math out the on-hit damage as, for funsies, half the value of AD. Since AD can crit and feed into items and whatnot, I decided let's just divide by 2 and say it's good, whatever. So that's, you know, more of the budget of the item in case you wanted that going in here, which then makes new Wit's End, by the way, efficient before you even count the bonus MR and MR shred. But of course, I also mathed out what 25 MR is worth, which is 450 gold, which, great, is now worth 540 gold, and that's wonderful. The item is better on melee, full stop. It can't be worse. What I also did is this little table here, which is how much MR shred are you getting in both versions. So the top end is, of course, for a melee champion, 5 hits down the line. What I did for my little right side columns is if you're targeting a 35 versus 100 MR target, how much damage amp am I getting as a result of this change? And it's 1, 1.5, 2.5, 3.5, almost 5% bonus damage, magic damage, bonus damage, against a squishy, a 35 MR target. This is an Ahri or a Ashe who doesn't buy a Hex Drinker or a Spectre's Cowl or an Abyssal Mask or a Banshee's Veil. 1 to 5% more magic damage. There's not a lot of magic damage on hit fighters, melee type guys, but hey, Aurelia's going to get a little bit more damage if he wants to buy this. Volibear is actually a good example of a champion who does do magic damage on hit. Volibear is a good Wits End user. He'll gain some damage out of this. 5% damage out, not bad. And, plus his 5, or his extra 5 MR on himself. Against a tankier target, it's only 0.5 to 3%, but, still a meaningful amount of MR shred. It did get nerfed for range. Again, the item got cheaper. It has more on hit damage. It's probably not overall nerfed much for ranged, but they're less good uses of it, right? Here's the old shred. Here's the new shred. Eventually, from your 9th auto attack onward, it does more, but whatever. There's the math. In case you wanted it, it's there for you. Congratulations, you have it. Precision is now going to split stats with Sorcery and Domination. Resolve already did split stats, so now basically every single possible tree combination now splits halves. Since Inspiration has no stats itself, it just inherits. Precision or a Sorcery Domination give the same stats, so they're essentially sharing. And so now all tree combinations share stats at 50-50, just like Resolve did, which, whatever, that's fine. I do want to point out, by the way, that this is generally fine for tanks and fighters. I want to talk to you guys about Worlds 2015, where Darius was meta. Some Dariuses did run 15 AD, meaning Marks and Quints, in their rune pages as players. But most of the Dariuses, especially the ones who were actually good at the game, had brains, and thought about this, actually ran attack speed Quints. The good Dariuses ran attack speed Quints on Darius because they realized he has such bad attack speed scaling, but still has reason to auto-attack, they wanted to inflate his attack speed numbers. So for a lot of these fighters like Darius and Aurelia and whatever, they do care about their attack speed stat. And of course we know a lot of Aurelias run attack speed Quints, and Aatrox ran attack speed Quints a lot of the time as well. So truly, I think any clamor over, oh, why are they nerfing my stat bonuses, I think is wrong. Yeah, sure, if you were going to be a Resolve, and again, if you were already Resolve Precision user, that didn't get changed anyway. It was only for the Precision Domination and vice versa users, which, I think is fine. So I think this is actually reasonable can be a power buff for fighters, since fighters have a hard time getting attack speed outside of Trinity Force and maybe a Wits End. And here's the thing that we want to talk about, which is the press the attack buffs. It is getting 10 to 60 more damage. The damage amp now scales with character level. So here's the table and press the attack. First of all, the damage proc in and of itself, the trigger, definitely a meaningful increase in the damage dealt. This is meaningful. It does matter. And as far as the damage amp is concerned, which lasts for a few seconds, it is only a nerf if you dealt at least this number in the column before the amp came through, right? So if you triggered press the attack by getting 3 autos off, if you then did another 125 damage before the amp wore off, then press the attack is a nerf. Very frequently, you did not get 125 damage off. And at level 2, it becomes 172. At level 3, it becomes 225. I mean, at a certain point, you really just don't get this much damage out on your opponent during this time frame anymore. I mean, really, once you're at the point where you have ultimates, 400 damage is not really happening. It can, but it's probably not. I want to also point out something, that this disproportionately helps top laners more than 80 carries, right? Like a jungler might duel an 80 carry, might have a Zyra support or a Nami dealing some damage, or a Leona goes for the hard engage and you get all these things going on. But a Darius and an Aurelia or whatever are fighting by themselves with no one helping out. And yes, these champions have spells, but if you're really hitting auto, then cast my first spell, let's be honest, that's probably not happening. That's probably not happening in a lot of these cases. And so what this means is press the attack is, much like Aftershock, buffed for top laners. And I want to take a quick aside, by the way. I think not enough top laners talked about this or thought about this. Aftershock is now the best keystone on several top laners, including Camille, by the way, including Singed, who's still not running it all that often, including several other top laners who have hard CC on their kit. Turns out being invincible for your trading pattern, really good. And so a lot of people were like, oh, I might run Klepto. Oh, I guess I'll run something crappy like Comet on Camille. I guess I can poke. And yeah, like 85% of players are running Comet Camille, but the 10% they're running Aftershock are winning a lot more games. you're a much sicker team fighter. You're a much sicker trader in lane. Truly consider these options now. I feel like top laners in general seem very slow to adapt and actually read through patch notes and instead just complain that top lane is still shit somehow. Please consider pressing the attack. Your trading damage has gone higher. All right. Next up, changes to the resolve tree, and this is pretty substantial. Okay, so the tenacity when casting summoner spells has been moved to the very bottom row. The very bottom row has lost the second wind regen. So now your choice in the bottom row here is percent max HP, increased shield power, and tenacity. Those are now your changes in the bottom row. Do I want max health, regen, well, heals and shields, or do I want tenacity? And these feel like pretty comparable stats to care about. They're sort of raw stats in a way, right? So that's what this row is about. They also then moved second wind to the second row. You now have flat armor, flat MR, both stats after 10 minutes, or regen. And I think second wind does belong here as where it lives, but I can't wait for Iron Skin and Mirror Shell to disappear, because if you're choosing Iron Skin or Mirror Shell instead of conditioning, you're choosing to pick power for your laning phase. What does second wind do? Help you survive lane. So the problem is, Iron Skin versus second wind is purely a math problem. And Mirror Shell versus second wind is purely a math problem. And conditioning is actually a real choice between stats now and stats later. Stats in lane versus stats later. So I dislike that we have a rune setup that is clearly math versus math, and good luck choosing. My instinct is second wind is better, by the way, but I could be wrong. In most cases, you probably have the choice between just second wind and conditioning now. You also lost the ability to say, I'm fighting Jace. Oh crap, Iron Skin plus second wind. You can no longer do that. Have fun. So that seems like a weakness. However, they have added a new rune called Bone Plating. You take less damage over 5 seconds for 3 attacks or spells. So if you're getting hit by single poke, Bone Plating is worse than second wind. But if you're getting hit by and I don't know how it works against dots, by the way. I don't know how this would work against like a Teemo E. I have no idea. I couldn't tell you. If it just blocks each tick for 20 damage, maybe so. In which case, maybe Bone Plating plus second wind is like the best way to land against Teemo. I don't know. If you land against like a Kale or a Lissandra or like an auto-attacker actually attacks you several times, Bone Plating seems pretty useful. Probably good against Singed, which probably does apply in this regard. I don't know for sure, though. Maybe it actually counts the same way Electrocute does, where it needs a different application, which, well, that's going to require some stuff. I truly don't know. I don't know enough about the ability. The level scaling is pretty good. Keep in mind, this is 150 max HP every 45 seconds. That's pretty meaningful, to be honest. This is a pretty good selfish durability. And this selfish durability, by the way, fights... right, so this is a rough game. I need more health. This is I'm winning by a lot, so I want to go take turrets down, or I'm going to support my team. These feel like meaningful choices, and I'm happy about that. Cool. I think this is a compelling path. This is a two-choice path, and this is, I think, a compelling path. So I think there are some good changes being made there. Next up, Inspiration. You no longer get Potion Duration for being an Inspiration primary. I don't know if I really feel like we needed this, because I feel like Inspiration primary already wasn't that good in most cases. The use case of Spellbook went down over time. The use of Glacial Augment is still only really good on Aurelion Soul. And Kleptomancy, I think the uses are in line right now. So, I mean, this feels very strange to me that we're doing this. I don't mind like the design implications of, hey, Inspiration probably doesn't need all the freebies anymore. It can just take on the stats of whatever the other path is. I think that's okay. And obviously this got just moved down here to your potions and elixirs last longer. But you're still missing out on something. Stopwatch nerfs I'm okay with. I think it was still a bit strong. And it going to 10 minutes is a good buff to assassins. Now if you're playing against, you're playing a Azir into Zed in lane, it's like, well, I need to respect the fact that I still probably want to run Stopwatch. I want a cooldown reduction on my Zonias, and I want a cheaper Zonias because I'm sure as hell going to buy that item against Zed. You damn know it. But now he gets to all in me between minutes 6 and 9 without me getting a free Stopwatch to prevent his first option. I think this is a good change for the game. I think Perfect Timing honestly could use the nerf. I would have liked if this nerf came in sooner. I didn't like that it cock-blocked the level 6 all in. This probably should have started at 10 minutes. But when you're making like 30 new runes, I understand the oversight. I'm an apologist. Sue me. As far as Time Warp Tonic existing, this still fights the 5 CDR, 5 max CDR, 5 summoner CDR, 5 item CDR. Good luck actually wanting this. That said, you do get 5% move speed during your uses of potions and elixirs, which means it is basically an auto-include on Kleptomancy and probably not picked for anyone else. Basically. I also think with this nerf to stopwatch, I think you probably only pick it up when you actually want it. 10 minutes for a dead item slot is a long time, especially for an item that only sells for like 50 gold. There's a decent chance we're going to see a lot less inspiration secondary, and that's fine. I think there's also a good option that we really see people decide to go corrupting potion first item, inspiration secondary, and they run Time Warp Tonic. Because that just seems really, really nice. Your corrupting potion lasts 20% longer. You get move speed while doing it. And hey, I'm going to like looking at this on someone like Singed. Right? And of course you would like to go Resolve or Sorcery, get free AP, right? You have the choice now if you're playing Singed of do I go Celerity for 4% move speed or do I go Time Warp Tonic for 5% move speed as long as I'm able to chug my corrupting potion. And you might choose that, and that's a compelling choice, and I'm very happy about that. This is another top lane change, also a bot lane change. Blast Cone over top lane and over Drake, Scuttle Pit, Herald Pit, and over bot lane and over Drake Pit are spawning basically 3 minutes later. Instead of spawning at basically 2 minutes flat, it spawns at 5 minutes flat. This means you can be a lane dominant top laner and not have to ward this brush against freaking Udyr. He has to actually walk. It means when your teammate takes Scuttle Crab for you, unless they can gap close this, which to be fair, plenty of champions can, but they have to make the actual choice to do so. It means you can ward this sort of area right here and actually feel good about it. I think that is a big positive for top laners who want to be lane dominant. Less ward cheating by junglers, which, sorry for junglers, you can't cheat your wards as much or against enemy wards, but sorry, too bad. A Kindred and Graves buff. Big Krug no longer takes half damage from ranged auto attacks. If you didn't know it existed, now you do. This also does help blue side bot lane poach the camp, right? They run to lane, they say, hey, we're playing Zyra and Callista. Let's go take the Krugs for free gold. It's now easier to do that. This is really, really nice. I do want to see if I can play like an auto-pushing bot lane, like a Sivir Zyra or something, or a Caitlyn Zyra, and then go, yep, we're going to run and take Krugs. It's worth 100-something gold. I like doing things like that. I like eking out advantage that way. But also, again, this is a straight-up buff to Graves and Kindred. Those ranged auto-attack junglers, even Nidalee to a small degree, they kill Krugs more, which means they can earn gold more quickly. Great! Next major change, because there's still more happening. Hand of Baron. Oh my word. Okay, first let's look at the base stats changes. Okay, the initial stats, 25 AD becomes 40 AD. Okay, 24 AD becomes 48 AD. 25 AP that became 40 starts at 40 becomes 80. Okay, so here is the table of stats. And now, do note real quick that this is every 1 minute, and then with these lines, it's every 2 minutes, so the scaling is hastened down here. But the attack damage is lower until the late game, around minute 33, 34. But the ability power is meaningfully higher all the time. I also put it into graph form. The blue line is the old version for both attack damage and ability power. The red line is attack damage now, and the gold line is ability power now. So mages got better with Baron. Attack damage champions got... and keep in mind, the average solo queue game ends around 33 minutes. So for attack damage champions, Baron is worse. And now if you're someone like Corki who can use attack damage and ability power, okay, maybe it's actually better for you because the AP is higher, but for the most part, Baron is arguably worse on you as a champion. For Akali, it's way better. You get both. Feels good. So that's nice. What also happened is this is freaking massive. Fixed a bug where bonus attack damage, such as from Hand of Baron and Banner of Command, weren't affecting siege minions when Baron buffed. I want you to guess, without looking at that chart I showed you a second ago, what percentage DPS increase is this just to Baron and to Baron plus Cannon? I'm going to give you 5 seconds to pick a number. How much better do you think it is? I'll drink some water while you think about how much better this is. Ready? Get ready for some serious shit. If you were just buffing the cannon minion with Baron buff, at 20 minutes, it is an 85% DPS increase for cannons against turrets. Even at 60 minutes in, where I stopped calculating because 60 minutes is long enough into the game, it is still a 50% damage increase to the turrets. Cannons, also want to point out, by the way, this got added, let's say 12 patches ago. Cannons now turn off backdoor bonus when they're fighting them. Now, they're not in turret range. They don't get hit by the turret, but cannon minions turn off the backdoor bonus. So they are doing the full damage to the turret. With Banner of Command, they do 3.5 times the damage they did before, because it never counted Banner before. Even at 35 minutes into the game, a bannered Baron cannon minion does triple the damage it used to. This is a massive, massive, massive buff to Baron with sieging. So, if you want to play an early game team comp, you better have someone pick up a Banner of Command. Because holy moly, this is nuts. One more change into the game. Also, Cashman has also received 50% reduced damage. Melees already did. I think Cannons already did as well. But now casters take twice as long to kill because, let's be fair, they were a pushover with Baron buff on them. Elder Dragon. Respawn timer reduced from 10 minutes to 8, which means the earliest possible Elder Dragon number 2 has been changed from 45 minutes to 43 minutes. Earliest literally possible. Still comes in well into late game. Most solo queue games will never see this happen, but some will. They then buff the crap out of it. It lasts twice as long. The burn damage is roughly double as well, and your elemental drakes are worth double instead of 1.5x. The most possible Elder Dragons you could ever possibly have picked up were 6. And this is if there was a combined, 2 minutes of total lifetime of the first 5 elemental drakes. Basically impossible, but theoretically possible. I'm also making an assumption here, by the way, as we look at these numbers. So the burn damage before was 45 plus 45 per drake or dragon killed, right? Which meant Elder Dragon number 1 was worth 45 burn. Elder Dragon number 1 with Infernal Drake was worth 90 burn. I'm assuming that this second Elder Dragon thing is rolling in the first Elder Dragon you killed, because this is only on second Elder Dragon, which means that it was already the 45 plus 90, rolling in that first Elder, and then giving me an additional 90 per Elemental Drake. So what this is here is, again, reciting the fact that there is the burn at 8.3 with 0 Elemental Drakes. The burn at 8.4 with 0 Elemental Drakes does not change for the first Elder Dragon, right? The first Elder Dragon is unchanged entirely. So the 35 through 43 minute mark has not changed with Elder Dragon at all in any way at all. But I'm assuming that if you plop it down there with number 2 at 44, 45, 46, whatever minutes, it is now up to 3 times as good. What's nice is the burn is now meaningful even if you weren't taking drakes throughout the game. If you were taking drakes throughout the game, yes, it's still twice as powerful, or, somewhere around there. But it's basically 2 to 3 times as powerful based on drakes taken. And the burn is obviously increased pretty heavily from 40 to 135 and from 315 to 675. This is now into substantially scary burn range where Ezreal lands a Q, does 400 damage to you with the Q, and then 500 damage with the burn. That's a lot of poke. That's going to push some people off. That's quite a lot. That is quite a lot. Honor tells you what you got when you drop a capsule. That's nice. Yeah, as I expected, the scoreboard layout was not popular and was scrapped, but things like the vision score do still stay. Some small bug fixes. Get the right amount of stuff. Yeah, great, whatever. Really minor for the most part. I didn't think any of these were too terribly important. Darkstar Jarvan and Dragon Master Swain are going to come out. That's pretty sweet. Cool stuff, cool stuff. So that's the patch. It's big. This video is almost an hour and a half long because it took that long. As far as a TLDR, because I tried to do that, yes, this patch is huge. AP items should be increasing in choice, and I don't know for sure if it's a buff or nerf to mages as a whole. I think their first item is better, but I think their second item is, on average, worse. I think the choices are sharper. Like, they'll do what you want more often, but they are less good generally. Like, if you choose to stack Flat Pen, you lose the % health burn. If you choose to keep the % health burn to be a tank buster, you are weaker against squishies. So the average case is going to be weaker for mages, but the sharpened case is better, unless Death Cap is just OP, in which case mages are just overpowered. But they're hoping to make the first back a bit weaker, so maybe mage will be a bit weaker in the laning phase. Top lane buffs are nice for the fighters. Champions like Renekton and Camille are great Aftershock users. Please try using it. Try press the attack after the buffs as well. There's some shakeups happening there. Overall, pretty sweet. There's always in the garbage can, but they're going in the right direction. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.